Good morning. The Committee on Children and Families will come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Madam Chair.
Here.
Vice Chair Peters. Here. Representatives Prouty, Koslow, Dolan. Here. Gregg. Here. Hausman. Jameson. Here. Kelly. Here. Lobinger. Here. Loy. Here. Manser. Here. Schmidt. Here. Steinmetz. Terry. Here. Violet. Here.
With 12 present, we do have a quorum. First, the committee will begin an executive session. I do move that Senate substitute for Senate Bill 66 be voted do pass. Any discussion? I do have a substitute. It's been distributed. I move for its adoption. Any discussion? Sorry, ending in 04C. Of course, yeah.
Okay, Madam Chair, can you tell us what's in the
yes.
massive
Yep. I figured
substitute?
somebody would ask. I've got it right here. Okay, so as with Senate bills, that we've done this before, we're adding several House bills to this. One of those House bills being, and this Senate bill, just for the committee's edification, we heard it was Senator McCreary's age of marriage bill. All of these bills have either come out of the House or committee. So we're starting with Senate Bill 66 is obviously the carry bill. House Bill 121 is the baby box incubators that passed out of the House, Representative Murphy. House Bill 243, Representative Williams. This is the bill that allows women to get divorced while pregnant. House Bill 902. This bill was carried 4 years prior. We heard it in emerging issues last year, and for 4 years before that, it fits under the new title. The new title is Protection of Children, Vulnerable Persons, and Animals. This is the one that prohibits the state of Missouri from using gas chambers to euthanize dog and cats. We've heard that many times in this body. For those of you who are new, it always came out clean. House Bill 1298, that one we passed out of the House yesterday on third read. That's the cross-reporting bill for animal abusers and child abusers, so that those entities can work together. House Bill 1464, we heard that's the child pornography and child trafficking bill by Representative Lewis. We heard that in this committee, also passed out of the House. And the page number is very long because in that bill there's so much statute that goes along with it. And the last one is House Bill 1522, the diaper bank tax credit, Representative Lobinger. Any questions on the substitute? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Oops, I apologize. I will be adopting the substitute first. All those in favor of adopting the substitute signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You have adopted the substitute. I now move that House Committee substitute for Senate substitute Senate Bill 66 be voted do pass. Any discussion? Seeing none. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Madam Chair.
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters. Aye. Representatives Prouty, Koslow, Dolan. Aye. Gregg. Aye. Hausman. Aye. Jameson. Aye. Kelly. Aye. Lobinger. Aye. Loy. Aye. Manser. Schmidt. Aye. Steinmetz. Terry. Aye. Violet. Aye. Prouty.
It's the Senate Bill 66, the substitute. We had added the bills from this committee and a couple others on there. Diaper bank bill.
Aye. 14 yes.
I'm sorry?
14 yes.
By a vote of 14 aye and 0 no, you have voted House Committee substitute for Senate substitutes to Senate Bill 66 voted do pass. The committee will now move out of executive session into public hearings. We'll now hear House Bills 1072 and House Bills 1417, sponsored by Reps. Sparks and Whaley. Gentlemen, you may begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Ranking Minority members, and members of the committee. Thank you so much. I am Representative Sparks, District 110. is where I represent, and this is
Bert Whaley, representative of the 138th. So today, we will be presenting to you House Bill 1072 and 1417. This bill establishes the Missouri Prenatal Equal Protection Act. This bill states that the intent of the General Assembly to acknowledge the sanctity of innocent human life, which should be protected from the beginning of biological development to the natural death to the abolishment of abortion in this state. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the House, protecting life is essential. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, when does life begin? We know that life begins from conception. There is biological proof of that. In an article by the Northwestern University School of Law, they did a census. And this was a peer-reviewed journal of biologists and life science literature. This is reviewing published articles of the biological view of when life begins, which is often referred to in these articles is the fertilization view. Now, my biology teacher is going to come out in me, so just bear with me. Fertilization is the uniting of the sperm and the egg, creating a unique genetic person. No other person has the same identical DNA, unless they're identical twins, and even there you have variations in alleles and things of that nature. We're not going to go into all that, but we could do that, but we probably shouldn't right now. Now, in this article, they reviewed 1,058 different academic institutions, totaling 5,577 biologists. 96% of those biologists agreed that life begins at conception, or what we refer to as the fertilization view. That's our science. We can't escape what science shows us. These are biologists. They know this is their field. When we look at that, we also have in our state statutes that life begins at conception.
I'm sorry, Representative, you cannot use a prop.
Oh.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
So again, in our state statutes, we have life begins at conception. We are the defenders of life. We hold in our hands the preservation and the sanctity of life. This bill announces from the Hill of this state, the Capitol Hill, that we will preserve life from conception. We will honor the U.S. Constitution. We will honor our state statutes, and we will honor life.
So when the representative and I filed these bills, which are identical, it was in order to have a conversation, this conversation.
I'm sorry, Representative, will you pull that mic a little bit closer to so we can hear you better?
I apologize.
Great, thank you.
That we could have a conversation, and we acknowledge that the conversation is uncomfortable. We acknowledge that either end of the spectrum on this issue is going to be extreme and may not be able to reach a consensus. We understand that. We acknowledge it. We believe, though, by our convictions, that the conversation must be had. It's a conversation that we've been having in this state. It's a conversation that we will continue to have. And so what we have tried to do is simplify it down to three main questions, which is it life? And while we believe that it's life, science also shows that it is in fact life, right? So we can actually see it, we can actually observe it with our own eyes, that it is in fact life, but not just any life, human life. It is not organic life, it's not plant life, it's not a mammal, it is in fact human. And that life is in fact unique. It is not the mom, it is not the dad. It is genetically identifiable and unique, like a fingerprint. And if it is in fact life and unique in its very nature, and provably so, then is the natural process of human reproduction that leads to an eventual fully grown human being, when does that life deserve equal protection under the law? That's what this bill is attempting to do. It's attempting to clarify a contradiction, a seemingly contradictory part of our law, which is, yes, statute says that life begins at conception, but when are we going to acknowledge that life and that life deserves equal protection under the law? When something like Amendment 3 gets passed into our Constitution, we believe that Amendment 3 is unconstitutional, not just based on the state constitution, but under the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And so what we're trying to do with this piece of legislation is not only have the conversation, but to actually clarify that point in law. What is it that makes a human being a human being? What makes a person a person? And when does that person deserve equal protection under the law? That's the conversation we're having today. With that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Representatives. Questions from the committee? Representative Ani.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To inquire.
Please proceed.
Okay. So, I heard you say a lot of things this morning, gentlemen. I think I want to start with Representative Whaley, if I could. I heard you say we will honor our state statute. Can you tell me more about that? You said our state statute says that life begins at conception. Is that how we're honoring our state statute?
Yes.
Okay. And have you taken any public votes on any of the bills that are floating around to repeal Amendment 3, or Proposition A, I mean, sorry? No, Proposition A.
Proposition A does not pertain to.
Absolutely, you're right. But Proposition A, the language that was passed by the voters, is in our state statute. So I'm curious if you're willing to honor that state statute or if it's just the state statute.
Well, I voted on that based off of what my district wanted me to vote.
And how did your district vote on Amendment 3?
They voted it down.
Okay. You also said we'll honor our Constitution. Are you aware that Amendment 3 is currently in our Constitution? And it would be honoring our Constitution and the will of Missouri voters at large to keep it that way.
But I stated the U.S. Constitution.
Oh, I
which
see.
overrides the Missouri Constitution.
Excellent.
Correct?
Okay, thank you, sir. So what in this bill allows, help me understand, what are the teeth in this bill? How are we holding people accountable?
The accountability is based off of life begins at conception. So when we have life,
No. Sorry, I hear what your bill says, or I know what your bill says. I'm asking, what is the accountability measure? How do we hold a person accountable? How do we make sure people are following the law if this passes?
so life begins at conception. With that, when we identify life begins at conception, inside the skin or outside the skin, it should be treated the same way. If a individual life is taken outside the womb, what do we call that?
Murder.
Thank you. So why would that change if it's inside the skin?
So what you're talking about is a fully formed human life being murdered outside the womb versus what we're talking about here, which is sometimes at certain stages of development, simply a cluster of cells. And what I'm getting at here is there are a few things. One, the idea that we would consider something at such an early stage of development, we would equate that to a fully formed human being outside the womb. That's a big leap, gentlemen. And I'm curious, under this piece of legislation, if you contend that it is murder. Actually, let's start there. Let's go back to that. So if you think it's murder, how do you plan on voting on HJR 73 today, gentlemen? Because HJR 73 outlines that, in your words, murder is allowed in the case of rape, incest, and potentially life of the mother. So are those lives less valuable if you vote yes on HJR 73?
They are not less valuable.
Okay, then how do you justify?
Let's go back to your statement about a cluster of cells.
No, I've moved on. This is my inquiry. So we are talking about your vote on HJR 73 today, which will be on the record, sir.
Today's will not be on the record.
It will if we make
It's a
it.
voice vote. Oh, well,
It can absolutely be on the record, gentlemen. And I'm curious.
that will most likely be a pass.
You'll be a pass, okay. And do you contend that your colleagues who will vote in support of it are supporting murder?
No. Amendment 3 put rape and incest exceptions into the Constitution. We did not. They're already there. So what we're going to decide today is how can we, on this side, Republicans, we believe that that is in fact the killing of human life, because
But it's okay to kill
we know.
human life if it is the result of rape or incest, is what the contention is of this language.
I do not believe that it's okay. Unfortunately, Amendment 3 put that into our Constitution. You're exactly right about that. And what we are going to decide today is how we can limit that.
Except that the language that HJR 73 is proposing literally strikes out all of that language from our Constitution. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a completely different piece of legislation that would put in our Constitution new rape and incest.
I don't mind having that conversation with you. I think it's a valuable one to have. Unfortunately, this is not HJR 73. This is...
I'm asking how you square your piece of legislation with HJR 73, which is the vehicle
I didn't
for
draft that.
an abortion ban in the state.
It's not my legislation. I can't square my legislation with anybody else's legislation because it's not mine. All I can speak for and
Well, you're going to have
defend
to
is
support
mine.
it one way or another, gentlemen. You have to take a vote.
And that is the vote that I'll have to take, and we'll see what happens when I have to take that vote. It's just like you and anybody else. Your vote is your vote, your voice is your voice, and you have to do what you believe is right. You say we're talking about a clump of cells. I'm a clump of cells talking to another clump of cells right now. We just have to decide when that clump of cells deserves equal protection under the law.
And you contend that it deserves equal protection.
Protection.
Yes, equal protection
At the moment of conception. And
immediately.
And here's the reason why. Both the age of human life or the geography, the place where it is, whether it's in the womb or out of the womb, makes no difference to me. It obviously makes a difference to you, but not to us. And here's the reason. You can have somebody that is in a coma, right? Brain dead. Does that person not deserve equal protection under the law? And yet,
Does that, let's assume, but let's actually take that scenario, because there are absolutely scenarios where someone is completely incapacitated, they are sexually assaulted, and they become pregnant from that sexual assault. What protection does that person deserve under the law to protect their body from someone invading it?
That's right. I totally agree with you. Full and equal protection under the law, meaning the rapist should be held completely accountable.
Right.
All
My
protection under
rapist
the
should have been
law.
held accountable, but he
Agreed.
wasn't. So many people's rapists are not held accountable.
You're right.
We do not have accountability under the law for the act of rape in this country. We all know that. We know rape backlogs are out of control across the country. We know women do not find justice constantly. So the idea that we would try to bring people to justice for this act and not for the act of rape, not for what got us to this point, potentially.
I don't think it's an
That
either
is-
or. I think it's a both and.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Representative Gregg,
To inquire.
please proceed.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I agree with what you're trying to do here. I do. I'm going to disagree completely with the previous representative's comments. Life does begin at conception. That's when the DNA is unique. And it's just as unique at natural death as it is at conception. It is the same DNA. It's just bigger. That's it. It's what part of the human development does it gain value the minute it becomes unique. So won't disagree whatsoever. Well, I wanted to go towards something probably that no one else has probably considered on this. This is from conception to natural death, correct? And a doctor, let's just say that it says, I think in, I'm believing here, offense of murder except where the victim of the unborn child and the defendant is the child's mother. So a doctor that performs an abortion can be convicted of murder then? What is one of the repercussions for being convicted of murder in the state of Missouri? The death penalty. Would you guys consider putting an amendment in here to abolish that then? Because if this goes toward natural death, but yet, you kind of see where I'm going?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question to have. I think that's a good discussion. We'd certainly be open to having a conversation with you offline for sure. And those are some of the things that we wanted to have the conversation about. It's like we don't have penalty provisions, but you're right. Murder is in our current state statute along with penalty provisions, so we'd have to obviously rectify that. So.
Right, yeah, and I understand the intent of your bill here, and I just think it would make it as clean and as pure as possible. Thank you.
Representative Hausman,
To inquire.
please proceed.
Representatives, thank you for bringing this bill. I do have one question. Under current law, if a pregnant woman is in a vehicle and she is hit by a drunk driver and passes away, how many lives is that person convicted of murder?
2.
2. That's what I thought. So would this law help that? And does it? Is there some point in gestation period where that would only be one person in that car accident, or is it always 2?
No, there is no distinction.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Prouty,
To inquire.
please proceed.
Thank you, and my apologies for stepping out. Today is a busy day, so if I ask you a question you've already answered, please indulge me. So really quickly, Representative, yes, sir. Whalen. Thank you, Representative Whalen. You said inside the skin?
Yes.
That's a very interesting way of putting inside one's body. That tickled me a little. So I am one who has been here since 2019 when we passed a near abortion ban in Missouri. Just throwing this out there, that's kind of what brought us to Amendment 3. The state kind of thought it was harsh without those exceptions, with all due respect to anyone's personal beliefs that are embedded in this bill. I'm inclined to believe that that will be the case again if the event that this passes. I do think that we should strongly consider not having this bill at all, but also just the teeter-totter between this is going too far and a near prohibition. We'll find ourselves in this cycle over and over and over again with these things, and if that's the will of the legislature, so be it. But in 2019 is what got us to an Amendment 3, and I thank you so much. And I know that because I was here when it happened, so just keeping that in mind. secondarily, and I'll wait till some other folks come to testify because I don't want to be redundant in some of the things. I appreciate Representative Gregg for the conversation about natural death and natural life. That is something important to have, and I'll circle back with you all because he's already hit on that. I personally believe that life, innocent human life, is something beyond me. As a Pentecostal, I believe we're all born into sin. However, I love the Lord. He heard my cry. I'm concerned about overtly Christian language being in statute that may draw some kind of lawsuit. Again, Rachel Prouty, Sister Prouty, if you will, missionary Prouty even believes that we're created in the image of God, which is completely separate than what we're doing in the government, making overtly Christian language. Particularly when we're talking about following the Constitution. And I'm not speaking about the separation of church and state. I am speaking about the assurance that individuals can choose and practice their own religion without government pressure, which is in the First Amendment. And then also throwing this out there, if life begins at conception, would you all be amenable to an amendment stating that the putative father would be responsible for child support in the event that the parents weren't together? If life begins at conception, we should be able to take care of that life. Would you all be amenable for that? Fantastic. I have a bill for that. That's House Bill 281, and I'm happy to amend that to the bill either in committee or on the floor. Thank you.
And if I may, I appreciate those comments very much. Just saying, with some of that biblical language, in our founding documents, and many of our founders in our country did reference the Bible many times, and I understand your caution, and it's warranted. I understand that, but that we are endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights as a perfect example. So I would just push back just a little bit.
Sure, and I'm gonna push back just a little more in that when this was, when our founding fathers crafted this very living document, I was not considered a person. I would have been considered property, which is why our Constitution is living and able to be amended to and changed as time changes. And so I would push back again to say what was then, where the overwhelming majority of us were some kind of variety of Christian, being that this is a melting pot country, that is no longer the case. And so I do appreciate the references to what the founding fathers intended or meant, but they certainly didn't mean for me to be sitting here asking you any questions. And thank God for the 13th Amendment that has been amended to the Constitution by a very, very bloody war. But it's a living document and subjected to change as the country is changing. I'm inclined to believe that in their wisdom that the founding fathers intended that for it to be so. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Terry.
To inquire, Madam Chair.
Please proceed.
So this question is for Mr. Sparks. In the last couple of weeks, did you pass around a committee substitute for HJR 54?
Representative, I'm sorry, will you speak into the microphone? We're having a hard time getting you.
I'm asking about a substitute for HJR 54.
I did not pass around one, no.
Okay, there was a substitute. It looked very different from this bill allowing abortions for up to 12 weeks. Do you guys seem to agree that it's okay to have an abortion, at least in some instances?
I don't. Now, here's what I will clarify that statement. If in cases where the baby cannot survive outside the womb, catastrophic fetal abnormalities, in cases of the health and safety of the mother, I think that that is appropriate. But that's as far as I would go personally.
Do you support punishment for people that have abortions?
It's a great question, and that's not the purpose of this bill, but I still think it's a good question to have, and here's why I'll answer that. I've gone round and round on that inside my own soul, because abortion is traumatic. It is traumatic, and sometimes the circumstances leading somebody to choose to have an abortion is traumatic. Sometimes they feel that that's the only option they have. So a little little story. A person very dear to me, member of my family, had an abortion. And what she told me is that if it had been illegal, that she wouldn't have had the abortion. She made those decisions based on her own circumstances at the time. It's obviously, I'm sitting here telling you the story, so she regrets it. It was traumatic. She suffered the trauma, lasting trauma. But trauma that she used for a benefit later on in life to help other people. So she told me, I knew what I was doing. I knew that it wasn't a clump of cells. I knew what I was doing. I didn't want to have the baby. But if it had been illegal, I wouldn't have done it because I don't break the law. So the answer is that's something that we have to decide. That's the conversation that we wanted to have. When do we protect life? When does that life that's unique and growing deserve equal protection under the law? And I understand that the argument is framed as taking away rights from women, but that's not at all what we're trying to do. We're simply trying to have the balance between the rights of all of us and when do we give those rights of equal protection to the life that's unique and growing. And so I guess that would be my answer.
Okay, so with that story though, and she did it because it was legal, and with this bill, it seems that in other cases it would be murder. So do you support murder for people that have abortions?
I think it is murder.
So you would support a murder charge for her?
If she broke the law and violated equal protection of an innocent human life, yes, I think it would be murder.
Who will enforce this bill? The doctors, the prosecutor, a public bounty hunter? Who's going to enforce this bill if this bill should pass?
Well, I guess in its simplest form, it would be equal protection under the law, so the same law enforcement agencies that exist and enforce current statute would.
And so what's to happen with Missourians who have abortions in other states?
This is only Missouri statute.
But if somebody go to another state to have an abortion and come back to Missouri, what's to happen?
Well, it's just like when you go to another state and maybe if the other state it's a crime, then it's a crime there. But in other states, they may not have the same statutes that Missouri does. This applies only to Missouri.
Do you support the death penalty?
I do. I think the distinction for the death penalty would be innocent life versus life that is not innocent. And even though, yes, we all sin and fall short of the glory of God, that's true. But there are certain things that people do that, in my opinion, deserve the death penalty, and I think the death penalty is necessary.
So you are saying that you support the death penalty. And you're saying that women who have abortion should be charged with murder and executed, right?
That's not what I'm saying.
Like,
everyone that's guilty of murder does not get the death penalty.
It's just no end to this. That's all the questions I have right now.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Mansour.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to inquire.
Please proceed.
And sorry, gentlemen, I have to wear this mask. It's to protect you now more than to protect me. So just in the last days of a sickness. So I have to come, when I read the bill, and I'm glad we're having a discussion about the bill, because I have a lot of concerns. I'm a lifelong Missourian and raised here and grew up here, and my siblings and parents here, and I have grown children who live here, and it's hard for me to imagine a scenario in which we would charge a woman with murder for taking steps to have an abortion. There may be multiple factors contributing to that action, as you described, Representative Sparks, with your friend or acquaintance. And so you're setting out, I want to be sure I'm understanding it clearly, that both if it was done by a physician in a hospital or clinic setting, that physician would be charged with murder, and the female would be charged with murder as well.
So that's a great question. Obviously, the intent of the bill is not to target women, nor is that part. But yes, it is. The intent of the bill is to get equal protection for the growing innocent life that's unique, human, right? That's literally what it is. So that's the balance in the conversation we have to have, which is how do we give and when do we give that protection to that growing innocent life? Because right now there's a contradiction in law. Would you agree? That yet we ascribe protection to the unborn baby when the baby's killed in a DUI car accident, and yet we don't give the same protection to the baby. And the only distinction I can find is whether or not the baby's wanted or not. It's the only distinction I can come up with, which is I don't desire to have this baby, so it's okay to destroy it. But in this case, the baby was wanted, so we're going to protect it and give equal protection in terms of when the baby's destroyed in a car accident. Do you see the contradiction? And so what we're trying to do is clarify the contradiction that exists currently in law. And we have to decide, when does that innocent human life, which we know verifiably is innocent and unique and growing and natural, and when does that life deserve protection? Now, the point of the bill is not to target women or to charge women or even doctors, but would in that case, if they did violate law and destroy that innocent life that deserves equal protection under the law, would they be held accountable? Yes. Under current statute. I'm not saying that we don't build a framework of how we will do that, but do you understand what we're trying to do? Clarify the contradiction, decide when the life deserves equal protection under the law, and what will the consequence be? So you're kind of looking at it retroactively into existing law. How would we do that? Yes, I believe it's murder. Yes. The answer to your question is yes.
So, Representative, what is the net effect of this kind of action on women and physicians operating in this state? Do you feel that this could have a negative impact on people wanting to remain in Missouri or physicians wanting to practice in Missouri? Because I have to say, this strikes me as incredibly repressive. This appears to be something that is extremely threatening to women and the medical professionals that sometimes find themselves in circumstances. And I'm not clear. You've said, well, if the mother's life was at risk or something, they could take the action that's needed to save the mother's life. Does the mother's life then take preeminent? Yes. But who makes the final decision? Who in our state will make the final determination if the doctor's decision was reasonable and appropriate? Right now, medical decisions are reviewed internally within a hospital or clinical setting. They are viewed by the professionals there in the building who have studied and have a history and a professional codes by which they operate, and they make those kinds of case reviews and decisions. But what is the state's role then in ascertaining whether the state agrees if that doctor made the correct decision?
Well, to answer your two-part question, the first part being, would this have a chilling effect on women or physicians in our state? I do not believe it would, simply because exceptions in terms of ectopic pregnancies, when a D&C needs to be performed, this already exists in Missouri. This wouldn't change any of that. And let's play into your hypothetical that it would be chilling and that physicians or women would feel repressed and leave Missouri. Is that the cost? Is that the cost to protecting innocent life that cannot speak for itself? See, that's exactly the contradiction in the conversation we want to have. The cost of somebody feeling repressed or wanting to leave Missouri because they feel their rights are infringed, and yet the rights that cannot speak for themselves, the innocent human life that is in fact growing as part of a natural process, when does that life deserve to be protected? And if the cost of protecting that life is that some leave Missouri, I'm okay with that personally. That's for your first part of your question. Your second part of the question was what?
I'm gonna go on with that.
Okay.
Actually, it is already having a chilling effect. We've had a decline in obstetricians and gynecologists choosing to practice in the state of Missouri. So we've already done really well in that area, frankly. Women have to go other places. And fortunately for me, I live in a major metropolitan area, but I'm not sure that other women who are in other parts of the state who want to have thriving families are going to fare as well. I can't get past the concern about the criminal penalties and the jailing and imprisonment of women in the state of Missouri. And that is going to be very difficult for me to make a judgment that women in the state of Missouri have so few rights and self-determination in this state enacted by the laws, which feel very repressive, that they actually would face imprisonment. How do you view IVF in this scenario? I know when I was campaigning, I ran into quite a lot of women of deep faith who found that their pathway to family formation was through IVF, and they were very, very happy and fulfilled by that process. So how do you view IVF within the context of this?
Yeah, great question. And I appreciate the discussion. I think in vitro fertilization is an amazing process because it allows people that can't have babies or struggle having babies to, in fact, get pregnant. And I think your part of the question is, well, what happens with the embryos that are fertilized and growing, or it's essentially in a stasis, right? Very slow growing, frozen,
Yes.
right? I think they deserve protection too. If they're not going to be used, can they be put up for adoption? Can they, according to mom or dad? I think that that's a good conversation to have. I deserve that. I think that we should build an infrastructure for protection for those babies because I do believe that they deserve equal protection under the law. I think IVF is amazing. And I think
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So,
well, sure. Can I finish real quick, though? Because IVF is incredible. And we're talking about helping people have babies instead of what we're talking about here today, which is abortion, which destroys babies. So I think I find that interesting when that argument always pops up during this debate. Because we're talking about IVF, which helps people who desperately want to have babies, in the same debate where we're talking about destroying babies. And I just find the contradiction, we should at least acknowledge it.
I'm sorry, I can't acknowledge that contradiction. I think I have a different perspective than you,
Sure.
but I respect your
understand.
viewpoint on that. So, who then, if when those eggs are fertilized, and oftentimes the parents will meet with the physician, and the most viable will be implanted in the mother in the hopes that they will implant, okay? And not all embryos may in fact be as viable. Who makes the determination and who is responsible? Does the state take a role in that as well?
That's a great question. I without being an expert on in vitro fertilization, and I'm not a physician, just my instinct, if we're speculating, would be to allow a physician to have a great deal of input, obviously because they're experts in that field. And obviously the intent is for a healthy pregnancy. So that's what the intent is, not to destroy the pregnancy, but to, in fact, make the pregnancy successful. So in that case, I would defer to a physician and an expert. And I would be hesitant, at least, and when we're talking about building an infrastructure in which the state inserts itself. So, without being an expert, that's how I would answer that.
So
Very cautiously.
the
I would
state
I would tread cautiously. That's my answer.
So the state would not, there would not be a threat hanging over the physician's head as to the determination that is made with the parents regarding the use of the remaining embryos.
Certainly not with this bill.
Thank you.
Representative, are you finished?
I'm done. Thank
Okay.
you.
We'll take a few more questions. Representative Lobinger,
Thank you to comment.
please proceed.
There was some discussion earlier regarding the when a mother's life is at risk, and I've spoken with several OBGYNs, and there is a distinction between medically necessary separation, where the intent is not to kill the child, but the intent is to save the mother's life. Abortion maybe the child's life may end as a side effect of that, but the intention is not leading, the main intention is not to kill the child, it is to save the mother's life. And as the pregnancy goes on, there can be medically necessary separation that does not kill the child. If a health risk arises later in pregnancy, they can do that early delivery and save both. So just that distinction can be important, an important part of this conversation. And I had several OBGYNs ask if I can help communicate that distinction as we have these conversations. Also, we talked a lot about human development. Humans take about 25 years to fully develop. That's when our brains finally develop. And so just arbitrarily choosing a point in human development to say that we aren't human when our cells are human, as you mentioned earlier, they aren't some other species. They're just in one stage of development. I think it's very arbitrary. We wouldn't now do that with a toddler who is less developed than a young child or less developed than a teenager. And no matter how frustrated some people get with their teenagers, we don't choose that as an option for a less developed teenager than an adult, allowing an end of life because of difficult circumstances. And abortion itself doesn't solve a lot of those difficult circumstances. And so I personally work very hard to help alleviate situations that may make women feel trapped into that decision. I think that's an important part of our discussion as well, looking at the whole situation and how can we alleviate some of those struggles. And so thank you for your time today.
Gentlemen, I have a quick question. On page 3, line 6, already in statute, the defense of duress as defined, et cetera. And then line 7 goes on to say, as to the offense of murder, except where the victim is an unborn child and the defendant is the child's mother. Can you explain to me what you were kind of thinking there?
That's essentially what Representative Lobinger was just kind of speaking about. That's my understanding as well, which is there is those instances where it's necessary, and we acknowledge that, and we wanted to provide protection for that. Again, the purpose of the bill is not to at all penalize or prosecute or target moms or even women in a distressful situation. It's not. But we're trying to balance that with providing equal protection under the law with an innocent human life. It's a difficult conversation to have, and we're trying to get to where we can do both.
Thank you. Representative Peters.
I'm sorry, I just had a comment.
Please proceed.
So I heard one of the committee members say that we as women have so few rights in Missouri. And I just have to comment that I think it is absurd that we have this fallacy of that. And this victim mentality, I think, is really continuing to be harmful to our side of the aisle. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
I'll take 2 final questions. Representative Gregg.
to comment, actually.
Please proceed.
Okay. I'm going to piggyback on Representative Peters. This bill, if I'm reading it correctly, is not about taking rights away from others. It's not about that. This is purely to wrap our head around, which some of us have already done, some of us haven't, some of us have struggled with it. Life begins at conception. This is about the baby. This is not about rights of mother at all. This is, so, hearing, well, women don't have enough of this, or, this is oppressive. The oppressed one is the one being killed. So that's the comment that I just wanted to make, is that let's stay focused. Let's not chase rabbits of all the other. This is about the baby. This is not about everybody else, really. Thank you.
One final question or comment, Representative Jameson.
To inquire, Madam Chair.
Please proceed.
Good morning, gentlemen. This is a very complicated issue. We disagree, but I totally, wholeheartedly respect your opinion on this matter. I've gone on record before, personally. I have strong objections to reproductive freedom.
Representative, I'm so sorry, we can't pick you up. Will you put the microphone? Thank you.
Professionally and politically, as policy, I wholeheartedly, totally support reproductive freedom, and it's conflicting. And if I was presented with this issue personally with my family, I don't think I could ever consent to the procedure, but that's my personal choice. I respect other persons and their choice on this matter. This line of question is, with that being said, I'm not trying to play a gotcha game here, okay? I'm just trying to have a respectful dialogue. Mr. Sparks, you indicated earlier that you believe that women who consent and execute the procedure of abortion should be charged with murder. Is that correct?
I did not say they should be charged with murder. No.
Do you believe it's murder?
I do believe it's murder.
Okay. So if someone's committing murder, should they be charged with murder?
So, yes.
Okay. So do you believe women who execute the procedure of abortion should be charged with murder?
Yes.
Do you believe a woman who is a victim of rape or incest and thereafter executes the procedure of abortion should be charged with murder?
Repeat that.
Yes, I'm sorry. A woman who is a victim of rape or incest and thereafter executes the procedure of abortion, should that woman be charged with murder?
I think that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I'm answering honestly, because when I put value on the innocent human being that's developing, to me personally, I understand that you've acknowledged this conversation is a difficult one to have, and the fact that we're sitting here, I think, is valuable because we want to have that conversation. I just think that whether a human being exists because of rape or incest should not determine whether or not they can be destroyed or not. I would put value to a person that is the product of rape or incest, even though it was traumatic, especially obviously for the woman involved in the process. But I would not remove not one iota of value to that person that is, in fact, the product. Because I know people that are born out of the product of rape.
Yeah.
And they are no less valuable today than they were the day they were conceived.
And that's your opinion. I totally respect it, and you articulate it very well. But the question is, sir, a woman who is a victim of rape or incest.
Is it murder? Yes.
Okay. So hypothetically, under the scenario then, a woman who is a victim of incest from, let's say, her uncle, the woman you believe should be charged with rape. Is that correct?
No. The woman would be charged with rape?
I'm sorry. A woman who is a victim of incest, let's say from her uncle.
Yeah. He would be charged with rape.
He would be charged with rape, right? And the woman, the incest victim, who executes the procedure of abortion should be charged with murder.
Well, I would hope that she wouldn't have an abortion.
But let's say she does.
If she breaks the law, then she would be held accountable for breaking the law.
So
yeah, sure.
Incest survivor would be charged with murder, and then the rapist, the uncle, will be charged with rape. Is that correct?
You want to talk? Yeah. I've been talking a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes. But we have a judicial system that is going to look at that individual case. And that is up to a jury to make that decision, not us. That's why we have a judicial system. We have a legislative system that lays down statutes, and we have a judicial system that has the prerogative.
Yes, sir.
The prerogative to look at each individual case and assess if that is maybe charged with murder, but not convicted. We're talking about charge versus conviction.
Yes, sir.
And I think each individual case, and that's the beauty of this country, is to have this type of system. So that is not the point of this bill. This bill is to identify and sanctify life.
Yes, sir.
From conception. It doesn't matter if it is a clump of cells. That is the part of the developmental process. Well spoken, by the way.
Yeah.
And so our determination of when life begins is already established.
Yes, sir. And
From the moment of fertilization to age within the skin, outside the skin, from 5 years old to 10 years old to 20 years old to 40 years old to 50-year-old. That's the sanctity of life.
yes, sir. And the cluster cells, I didn't use that phrase.
Right.
But under this hypothetical, the woman who is the incest survivor, charged and potentially convicted of murder for aborting the baby from her uncle, and then the uncle who commits the rape, the woman, the incest survivor, could theoretically serve a longer prison term than the rapist uncle.
So, I think it's fair to point out, how often does that happen? I'm not diminishing it. I'm asking you how often, because if we're going to have the hypothetical, which you would admit is a hypothetical, correct? You're creating a hypothetical environment in which to have this line of questioning, saying it's not a gotcha, but you're taking the extreme minimum, the extreme outlier, and applying it to the entire debate, which I don't think is fair and I think should be acknowledged. And if you're talking about a hypothetical, let me give you one. Should one crime justify another? The rape is a crime. It should be absolutely prosecuted, whether it's by an uncle or anybody else, to the most severe possible under the law. But then if, in fact, this bill were to pass, and that's the hypothetical you're giving me, then why would another additional crime justify the original one, or to balance it out? It shouldn't. And I would even argue that it would create more trauma. When speaking, and I'm sure you have, Representative Jameson, I think that you're a sincere man. You've spoken to, hopefully, rape survivors and hopefully folks that have had abortions. Have you?
Yes.
Okay. Then the conversations that we have, you know how hard they are. You know how traumatic they are. The circumstances surrounding why some people choose abortion and some people do not is unbelievable. And when we're talking about trauma, lasting trauma of a rape, then to be multiplied or compiled again with destroying an innocent human life, could in fact, hypothetically, be even more traumatic. Wouldn't you agree?
Mr. Sparks, number one, working in the legal field, I'm aware that these are not hypothetical scenarios. And I wasn't trying to do a gotcha question. And I respect your passion, sure. And I understand there's division in your caucus, and you guys standing here looking us eye to eye, putting your name on this bill. I disagree with you, but it's courage, okay? I strongly disagree, but there are many forms of courage, and this is a form of courage. Because I know there's a lot of division in your caucus. And it does create a discussion and a conversation. But, Mr. Sparks, it's not hypothetical. And we're going to have to continue to disagree. And with that, I'll end my inquiry.
Okay, so I have one thing for you guys. And I want you to really hear my heart on this because I'm sitting here having a moral dilemma, okay? First of all, this has been fantastic dialogue in this committee. Absolutely amazing. My question for you is, what happens when it's a minor? What happens when a minor gets an abortion, whether it's rape or incest or not? Are we charging a minor as a minor with murder? Are we charging a minor as an adult with murder?
Right. No, I that's not even in our scope of thought, to be honest with you. I don't believe so. And even today, when minors commit the act of murder, they're not held to the same standard typically. Now, there are exceptions where some minors can be charged as an adult. It is extremely rare. I would certainly classify this situation as a minor getting an abortion would not be held accountable to murder, in my opinion. And that is certainly not the intent of this bill under any, but it's a fair question, so I appreciate it, and the discussion is warranted.
May I continue on that line?
Please.
As a state, we need to do everything we can to provide support systems for pregnant teens, for pregnant women, to create a network that serves our population of women that are pregnant, to create an environment that's fear not. For we can, for God is with us, but we are the support system. We have on our money, in God we trust. We have statements within our legal or our founding documents that speaks of God, the Creator, Almighty God. We need to be a resource to every woman in this state that is pregnant, that has life within. If we are truly passionate about life, protecting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we must be a support system to the teenager, to the adult that has life within them. This is our duty. This is our responsibility. This is our passion.
Thank you, representatives. I think that concludes the committee's questions. We appreciate you guys for being here and presenting your bill. At this time, we will take public testimony. Is there anyone here to testify in favor of House Bills 1072 and 1417? Please state your name, leave your witness form, and you may proceed.
Good morning. My name is Timothy Faber, and I would certainly encourage everyone on this committee to vote do pass. And I think it's tragic that we even need to be having this conversation, for I never cease to be stricken by how many people think that it is okay to deprive innocent children of personhood and even life itself. Real quickly, in America's past, as Representative Prouty mentioned earlier, there were times when a whole race of people were not considered human and were not given legal protections. And thankfully, we've made great progress on that in our country. There's still work to do in some areas, certainly. Also in Germany, in the 1930s and 40s, there was a whole race of people who were deprived of personhood. And thankfully, in large part to the United States of America, that was resolved by defeating the Nazis in World War II. But here we are in the 21st century America, where there are many who would consider babies as less than human, deprived of personhood, and regulated into being nothing more than a clump of cells, deprived of their inalienable right to life and liberty. Some would go so far as to say that babies are vermin, posing a risk to their own mothers, and tragically they're often seen as not being financially viable. There are children dying, not because of their race or ethnic heritage, but simply because of their age or the fact that they are unwanted. In response to Representative Jameson's questions earlier, in the tragic instance of an uncle having incest with a niece, if that uncle were to cause that niece to have a miscarriage intentionally, whether it be by beating or by some medication that he slipped into her drink or whatever, would that uncle then also be charged with murder? I would think so, just as in the case of a DUI in a car accident causing the death of the child of a pregnant woman. So if the uncle can be charged with murder for intentionally causing the death of that child, why would the mom not? Or in another case, if a mother, and we recognize her as a mother because she has a child in her arms, whether it be due to post-menopausal syndrome, depression, or for some other reason, chooses to put to death her child, who may be 3 months old, would she be charged with murder? Certainly. But if she chooses to put to death her child 6 months earlier, that's okay. See, the real question here is that child from the moment of conception truly a child, or is it not? And that's really the question that we have to answer here today.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions for this witness? Representative Prouty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment. First off, thank you very much for acknowledging the fact that both the Black community and African American community, not just Black in general, and the Jewish community has suffered hardships in so many instances that historic tidbit seems to be denied and overlooked because it makes folks uncomfortable. So I certainly appreciate you for saying that. Couple points, though. So I wanted to go back, if I may, and feel free to sort of give your take on it. So the question the chair asked was about if children were to get pregnant. You hit back on Representative Jameson's matter. Regardless of whether the uncle tries to terminate the life of the pregnancy or what have you or not, the fact remains that there is a real possibility that a child could get more time than the person who violated her human rights. Typically, when it goes to court, the courts tend to assume that if it is not in the bill language, if such an exemption for children or any consideration to children is not put in the bill language, that it was the intent of the legislature who could have put it in there and would have, if they wanted to put it in statute, they would have done that. So it will be the assumption of the court that we didn't put that in there for children because we didn't want to. It's not what we think as a legislature. The judiciary is a different branch, and they are going to interpret what's in front of them, which is what we put in statute, the way we put it in statute, without any historic, they will lean on historic context, and historically, this legislature has put no exemptions. Secondarily, whereas RSMO 188.015 defines abortion in Missouri as the destruction of the life of the embryo and fetus, an abortion medically is just the termination of a pregnancy. It has nothing to do with one can have an abortion and that child could be born alive if labor is induced early. That terminates the pregnancy early. That is an abortion. The conundrum that the medical field has is, yes, it says in statute it destroys the life of the embryo. That's in statute, but medical practice says that the termination of a pregnancy is not called a separation in medicine. It's called an abortion. So we kind of conflate that within Missouri statute and what the medical field, to Representative Mansell's point, that's probably why we're seeing that healthcare shortage when it comes to OBGYN and providers, is because this statute says abolish abortion in this state, and to terminate a pregnancy, not the child, the embryo, whatever, just to end the pregnancy early, to induce an early pregnancy is called an abortion medically. And so just being particular about that.
Can I address that momentarily?
Yes, please, jump right on in.
So I am neither a medical doctor nor a legislator.
Yes, sir.
But I can tell you that in general conversation with probably 98% of Missourians, when the term abortion is used, it is understood as the putting to death of a child, of a fetus, of a whatever term you want to use there, but it's the ending the life of the child. So whether the medical community or state government or someone else is using different terms, that's a conversation worth having, certainly. But as a government entity, the legislative body, we define the things that we're describing in our legislation. And so in that regard, I would say that we need to be consistent, and perhaps the medical community will change the definition of their term abortion and come up with a different term or whatever.
I
But
seriously doubt that. I hear you, and I don't disagree with you when people say abortion. However, that is our burden to bear as individuals who have asked for a job of legislating. We have to make ourselves aware. Thankfully, in this representative democracy that we have, I don't want anybody to say we're not I get it. In this, we don't have to have any specialized training, credentials, or definition, and it's like that on purpose. I think it should be like that. But the medical field is something else, and they're not going to alter that. Luckily, we define it in statute how we define it. I just wanted to make that demarcation. It is our responsibility, though, as legislators, if we want to exempt children or we want to remedy that. That's all I'm saying. If the bill sponsors have interest in remedying and making clear about the time, if we're going to enhance a penalty, if a child has to seek an abortion, we assess that penalty to her rapist. I'm okay with that. That's an amendment I'd vote for. If we want to put something like that on here, we would have to do that in statute, not leave that up to assumption that just because the general public feels some kind of way, that the courts won't interpret it that kind of way. As we all know, ignorance of the law is no excuse, right? So it doesn't matter how the public determines it or how they feel about it, is what the statute says, and how the courts will say. We had an opportunity to put those caveats in statute, but the legislature chose not to, and so we're not going to exempt children in such a way. So that's all I want to put out in the atmosphere. If that's what we want to do, we need to make sure that that's in this bill language. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Anyone here to testify in opposition? Please state your name, leave your witness form, and you may proceed when you're ready.
My name's Chloe Mix. I'm from Greene County. I'm here to oppose. First, I'd like to say that what actually kills children is passing legislation that takes away Medicaid funding and the foster care system that in 2019 alone in this state lost almost 1,000 children. We should really think about that before we talk about pumping more children into that system. Secondly, I'd like to acknowledge, like Holly Jones said last week, this committee has already heard everything there is to hear about abortion. So I think it's important to focus on the fact that this committee continues to think that they know better than the people of Missouri. Some of these representatives have said over and over again that they believe the voters didn't know what they were voting for on Amendment 3, apparently for no reason except that they disagree. Our representatives seem to be sitting up here calling us stupid and saying our opinions don't matter. What would make it okay to keep bringing up bill after bill that we voted against? And what makes it okay to tell your constituents to leave the House of the People before getting to speak? You're willfully subverting the will of the people, and this is not democracy. But like Jeff Fernetti already said on the floor of the House, how we operate shouldn't be decided by the will of the people.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions for this witness? Representative Terry. I'm sorry, Representative Gregg. I'll come right back to you. I apologize. Go ahead, Representative Terry.
Just a comment. I want to thank you for your testimony. It is such a delight to hear a female talk about this topic. So I want to thank you for driving here today and giving your testimony. Because if anybody knows best, you would. So thank you.
Representative Gregg.
To inquire.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I think you are absolutely right. We do have a foster program that needs some major overhaul. In fact, probably replaced. It is that bad. Losing children is just one of the worst things that I could possibly imagine. And this committee has been working at fixes, or at least for the last 3 years that I know of, because that's as long as I've been on this committee. We do have a problem. You're right. However, I'm going to ask you, do you think, and play with me on this one, on this scenario here real quick here. Do you think that the lives of babies should be taken because we have a problem with something else? Do you think
I don't believe that someone that can't exist outside of another person's body is a human. That's not an individual.
Opinion, correct?
That is my belief, yes.
Opinion, right. Okay, so what are they then? It's a unique
Part of
DNA,
a woman's body until they are born.
even though the DNA does not match.
It doesn't matter. It's part of a woman's body until it is born.
Okay, so let's go back to the question I had. Do you think that since we have a broken foster system, that justifies killing babies?
I don't believe it's killing babies.
I'm just
as I've
asking you to
already
work with me
said.
here for a second. Do you think one problem
No,
justifies
my
another
belief
problem?
is just as based in scientific fact as yours. You can't just say that I'm wrong and to keep going with you.
No, but your opinion also doesn't justify mine. Amendment 3 only passed.
Justify yours.
Amendment 3 only passed in like 12 counties in this state. My county voted overwhelmingly against it. So when you say that we're averting,
Do
I'm
the
talking.
votes of your constituents matter more than all
This
of
is
the
my
other?
inquiry, so please give me just a moment. I had over 70% of my district ask me to readdress this. So they don't believe that the abortions that are happening were done. They don't believe that Amendment 3 was correct, and they want to see us readdress it. So the two things, my people don't believe that the murder of babies is justified by a broken foster care system, and they want us to readdress this because they don't believe it was done correctly the first time. So thank you very much.
Further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next in favor. Please state your name, leave your witness form, and you may proceed.
Madam Chair, committee members, thank you for your time today and your patience. I very much appreciate the conversation, getting to hear y'all deliberate this. My name is Bradley Pierce. I'm the president of the Foundation to Abolish Abortion. I'm an attorney, and I'm speaking in favor of both House Bill 1072 and 1417. Just to address a couple of questions of Madam Chairman. Your first question was regarding the duress provision, line 7 of page 3, or I believe that's what you were pointing to, Madam Chair. So that provision is specifically about someone who is forced into an abortion. So right now, if someone in the state of Missouri is forced into, if someone puts a gun to their head and says, murder this person or I'm going to shoot you, there's not a defense to duress for that. So if someone puts a gun to someone's head and says, drive me to the convenience store so I can rob it or commit any other crime, there is a defense of duress to that. But there's not a defense to of duress to the crime of murder in Missouri. And there is in some states, there isn't, there's not in others. In this case, though, we've created the defense of duress in the bill for this particular situation for a mother who is forced into an abortion by threat of death or serious bodily injury. So that way that's in the bill. Again, because it's a different situation since the life that she's being forced to take is inside of her own body. So it's a different situation than kind of other situations. So does that address your question about that? Great. You had one other question, Madam Chair, about a situation involving a minor. One thing just to point out, I'll come back to that specific situation, but just for everyone's benefit here, there's nothing in the bill, that speaks about prosecuting a woman. There's nothing in the bill really that speaks about, the various situations that have come up, or minors or things like that. The operative, as someone asked earlier, what's the operative provision of the bill? It's line 31, page 5, I believe, and I may have a different version than what you have, but it's the section in the definitions that apply to offenses against the person, adding in subsection 11 there that says person includes a human being, including an unborn child, at every stage of development from the moment of fertilization until birth. That's the operative provision of the bill. Really, all we're talking about here today is who's a person? Who is a person? Everything else is then like, all right, what is the consequences of defining personhood at the beginning of fertilization? Well, it means that the laws against homicide apply equally to them. It means that people can be prosecuted for murdering people, before they're born. All of those, death penalty, is a potential penalty for, law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, juries to consider, for the murder of all of that. None of that's in the bill. All of that is simply the result of providing equal protection, of just defining that that their lives begin at fertilization. And so all those things, the reason we're even having that conversation is because right now, under Missouri law, we deny personhood. We deny equal protection. We say that laws for me, but not for thee. Laws for born people, but not for you if you're not yet born, right? My life is protected by laws against homicide. Anyone who murders me, including my mother, can be prosecuted, right? The potential for the death penalty to act as a deterrent, a very strong deterrent against people taking my life. I'm grateful for all those laws, and everyone's lives in here is protected by those laws that protect your life. This bill just simply says they're people too. So all the laws that protect our lives should protect them too. And yes, the same penalties that are available for prosecutors, judges, juries to consider, those penalties that protect our lives should also be available to protect theirs as well. And really, this is, I know people talk about the will of the voters. It's an extremely valuable thing, but ultimately we do not live in a pure democracy. We do live in a constitutional republic, and so even the will of the voters is subject to the state constitution and the federal constitution. And as the bill, in the preamble of the bill points out, that the U.S. Constitution in the Supremacy Clause says, quote, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." So if, for example, Missouri were to pass a law, even submitting it to the voters, even passed by a majority of voters in the state of Missouri, that said, for example, that slavery is now legal, we are reintroducing slavery, right, then guess what? That would be null and void immediately. You can put it in your state constitution all you want, but it violates the U.S. Constitution. Well, the same thing happened here with Amendment 3. The United States Constitution says no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. When the state passed Amendment 3, yes, by a majority of the voters, it still violates the 14th Amendment. It was null and void immediately. And so that's why this bill is important, because right now there's not an existing statute on the books of the state of Missouri that defines personhood and then provides equal protection. So the passage of this bill will set up the opportunity for a lawsuit under the 14th Amendment.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I have to open up for questions. You said a whole lot there. So my question is, did you help write this bill?
I helped drafted it, yes.
Okay. And is there another state that already has this in place?
There's no other state that has passed legislation like this, but there are over a dozen that are considering it this session.
Okay, thank you. Questions for this witness? Representative Prouty.
Thank you. To inquire.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your clarification on some items. I just want to go back to the duress clause here, and thank you for pointing that out. I guess for me, I understand the premise. The bill is affording personhood at conception.
Right.
That concerns me for a variety of reasons, but I am just profoundly concerned of the tools of potentially subjecting a rape victim, a human trafficking victim, or any other type of human rights violation victim to potentially have a greater sentence than the person who accosted them causes me deep and great concern. Whereas I appreciate, yes, this is just affording personhood, it has implications throughout our statutes that, contrary to the vice chairman, and all due respect to her, does, I appreciate shaking a victim mentality, but in some cases, some people are actually victims. And I do want us to keep our minds on that as well. Again, if we are enhancing a penalty somewhere for this, where the victim whose human rights weren't violated bears the brunt of it, it would give me less heartache, but I'm really concerned about that. Do you have any, I know you said you helped draft this. Is that a consideration? I understand the premise of adding personhood. I see what you're trying to do, but I think the penalty of considering the mother a murderer in the event that their human rights were violated, it's kind of messed up. It's messed up.
So I can definitely speak to that. So we have a justice system which, when we write laws, and what the Constitution requires is equal protection of the laws, right? So we write laws that are non-discriminatory. We don't discriminate, we're not supposed to discriminate against people on basis simply of their identity, right? Their sex, their age, et cetera. And so that's what this bill does. This bill says, all right, equal protection, same laws. So in the situation of a rape victim, right, we believe that rape victim should be shown compassion, care, help, right? People should come alongside them, support them. People should not be encouraging them to murder their child, right? That needs to be taken off the table. What if, it would be the same thing. What about if that rape victim just decides 9 months later, well, you know what, I don't want to have my child, right? The afterbirth, right? Why are we, if we're saying, well, rape victims should be allowed to take the lives of their children, why are we limiting it, right? Why do we say, well, you make sure you do it before 9 months? Why not, once they see their child, wow, this child looks like my rapist, they should be allowed to take their child's life at that point. Why that? Right. So there's a certain, contradiction in the way that we treat this. So we should have supreme compassion for rape victims, but we should not be telling them that it's going to solve their situation to murder their child.
Sure, and in fairness, we have contradictions all throughout our statute. We dealt with one earlier this year with women who are pregnant getting a divorce. We have those things. Not saying one is right, wrong. I'm a person, I'm with you. I think that individuals should have equal access to the judiciary as everyone else. I do believe that. However, we also put things in law that when people err, when they transgress, that there are penalties for that. And I believe there should be. For example, in many states, and I'm thinking Missouri is one of them, if I am not the person that pulled the trigger, but I'm a party to a felony or a murder in any other way, and I'm not the actual murderer, I could still be charged with murder. I believe that's the case in Missouri. Am I right?
Felony murder, right.
There it is. And so I didn't physically murder the person, but I'm still responsible, and that person can also serve a life sentence. That's what I'm asking here.
Yeah.
How is that? Let me just say, I'm a no on the bill in general, but that particularly, even if I was, because again, I'm the resident Pentecostal of the assembly, even if I was tickling with the idea of a 12-week or what have you, that right there kills it for me. If I can be found guilty of murder by being the getaway driver during a homicide, I don't see this as any different. I am staunchly opposed to allowing rape victims get off easier than the person that they violated their human rights of. And I would strongly urge the bill sponsors and the author of the bill to consider that. So if we're talking about contradictions, we have them in statute elsewhere. If the mother of the child would be charged with murder, I don't know why her rapist wouldn't also be culpable for such a you get what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? It makes sense to me even if I'm not spitting it out. Happy to have that conversation.
And I'm very sorry to interrupt, but I am going to have to limit your testimony on this answer because we have some other folks and we're getting
And I'm
short on
happy
time.
to circle back with it. I hope you all see the point I've illustrated here. Thank you.
You may respond. I'm just trying to.
Try to keep it short.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Again, we're not punishing anyone for being a rape victim, right? What we're doing is we're saying, let's help her, let's care for her, let's take care of her and her child. It's not going to help her to murder her child. There's so many resources. There's like 2 million people in this country lined up to adopt infants. So many other opportunities. And so what we want is, equal protection. And again, we wouldn't let her do that to her 1-year-old. We shouldn't. That shouldn't happen to her 1-month-old. And the other, this is really important. One other thing with this bill is that it also protects women in this way. That is right now, even if you outlaw abortion completely, like under the Human Life Protection Act prior to Amendment 3. Women can still be pressured into abortion, right? Now, if someone forces them with a gun to their head, right, that's a crime. But they can actually be pressured into an abortion, and that's totally legal unless you have equal protection. Because it's not illegal to pressure someone to do something that's legal for them to do. And so we need to, there are many rape victims that are being pressured into abortions, and this bill would solve that too.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Any further questions for this witness? Representative Terry, please be as brief as possible. Proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to try not to say anything, but since you helped write this bill or whatever, I just wanted to say, even though the language, it really is about punishing women who have abortions. That's the only way I can see this. And what I'm trying to say is and then you want to change abortion, you're going to redefine abortion as murder. So when you're writing these bills and you're putting these stipulations in here as to what should be done to a female, would you have a problem with putting something in this bill as well, that if someone raped or committed incest, that the man, other than just being charged with murder or incest, would have his genitals or something cut off, or some type of punishment for a man? I mean, let's start talking about men and their process in these endeavors. Would you have a problem with that?
I think men who rape women should be executed.
Yeah. That's good to know. Okay. I agree with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next in opposition, please state your name for the record. Leave your witness form. You may proceed.
Good morning. My name is Emily Waples. I am from Greene County. I oppose not only because I am a product of rape myself, because I have also been sexually assaulted. My biological mother did put me up for adoption. I applaud her choice to do that. That's a very brave choice to do, and I will never, ever, ever condemn her for that. Now, in my situation, I absolutely would have gotten an abortion because I was 17 and a senior in high school. And I just think it's ridiculous that we're still talking about this. If I would have gotten pregnant from my rapist, I would have gotten an abortion. And I view it would be completely necessary. And another issue with this whole situation, and it is another hypothetical, I'm sure everyone's tired of discussing hypotheticals, but I was also supposed to be a identical twin. Now, when I was in the womb, I had absorbed my twin or eaten it, however you want to say that. Would I be charged with murder for that? Should I be charged with murder for absorbing my other fetus cells, whatever, in that womb? That's it.
Thank you for your testimony. It takes a lot of courage to say what you just said. So, questions for this witness? Representative Schmidt.
Emily? Yeah. Thank you for coming today. It's very brave to do what you're doing. And I'm sorry for the way you were conceived, but I am not sorry that you were conceived and that you were given the opportunity for life and the opportunity to be as passionate about these decisions and these topics as you are. So I'm very thankful for that. I think the underlying piece of this bill is to make sure that we're protecting potential of life in the womb. And so, the previous opposition mentioned that in the womb is part of the mother. I don't necessarily agree with that statement, but we can go there for just a minute. We were all part of our mothers, and we were all potential for what we are right now, for what you are, for what I am. And I'm thankful that we want to protect that potential of life. And so I think we can all agree maybe there's some work that needs to be done on this piece of legislation, especially in persecuting the mother. And you bring up a very valid question about, what happened in your mama's womb with your twin. So I think we can agree there's some additional conversations that need to be had so that we are protecting the potential of life while also not persecuting women who've gone through very tragic situations. So I just wanted to bring that forward, but mostly, Emily, just wanted to say that I'm very thankful that you're here today and that you had the potential for life and that was protected. And so I just want to thank you for coming.
Further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. Next in favor. Please state your name, leave your witness form. You may proceed.
Thank you for these. My name is Judah Marks from Pike County, Missouri. Father and 4 kids at home. One of them came with me. He's part of the reason that I wanted to come. I just heard about this last night. I didn't realize that this was happening. And can I just say my heart breaks, whenever I hear the testimonies of young ladies that have been hurt and the pain and the sorrow. And we live in a broken world. We live in a messed up world, a messed up country. And I know there are a lot of individual stories here that I think would make me weep even more if I heard them. And that question of how do we get out of this mess that I think we have made, going all the way back. We know the history of this country. And it gets to a point where we so desperately want to come together in unity and be that land of the free and home of the brave and peace, right? We want that, right? And so that question of what is our underlying standard that we need to come to agreement with when it comes to right and wrong, good and evil. And I can't help but notice within the rotunda here of this state capitol building all the references to Almighty God. And how important this was to our founding of this country, the founding fathers. Not all of them, but so many of them. This was what informed their right and wrong, and it poured out of them in the legislation and all the laws that were made, and up to a certain point in this country where the idea of abortion, it wasn't even on people's minds. And the host of other issues that we're facing today, all of the marriage issues and all of that, and how there was a turn and a time in this country where that all changed. 1900s, early 1900s, 1920s, we started seeing just a departure from, and Prophet Joel, he says, "Yet even now declares the Lord, return to me, return to me with all your heart, with fasting and weeping, and with mourning, and rend your hearts, and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in what? Steadfast love." So we can agree that we've done wrong. We can agree we've sinned. You and I, we've all sinned. But the offer of God saying, return to me, how can we do that? It's through Jesus, right? The cross of Christ. He bled and suffered and died. He took the penalty. He was tortured to death, naked, 2,000 years ago. He knew that we would have this discussion. He knew. He says, I'm willing to lay down my life and take the penalty and suffer the wrath of God so that you and I can be made right and be forgiven and be out from under his wrath. And so every baby that is being killed in the womb, every baby, I believe, is just heaping more and more and more judgment on us as a nation, as a country, as a people. In this state, I love Missouri. 30 years I've lived here and just pouring my life out, going, we desperately need to return back in that word, repent, turning away from our sin, saying, Lord, have mercy. God, have mercy on not anybody pointing fingers out here. It's me. Lord, have mercy on me. And then maybe, just maybe, he'll come in and change and start healing our land. Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much.
Is there an amen?
Thank you so much. Amen. Thank you so much for your testimony. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we do have to be to the floor at 10 a.m. Is there any questions for this witness from the committee? Representative Prouty, please be brief.
Not a question, just a comment to you and to everyone here. I thank everyone for being so kind to our guests, no matter what side of this issue they are. And of course, you and I are going to disagree on this, not on the story of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and happy Easter if I don't hear from you again before that, but we're going to disagree on this bill, but I do appreciate you being sympathetic to the young ladies that have testified and those of us who have been victims. And I just thank everybody for being polite and kind and considerate to every point of view in here. It can be very rare when we're talking about this situation, but understanding how delicate it is and to see the hurt on every side of the aisle, it's very important to be kind, and that's what certainly the Bible tells us to do when we're trying to draw people nearer to him. So I appreciate you and everyone else in here. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Those were excellent points. Any further questions for this witness? Thank you so much for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Next in opposition. Anyone here in opposition? Seeing none, next in favor. Please state your name for the record. Leave your witness form. You may proceed.
My name is Josh Holler. Wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. That's right, Holler. My name is Josh Holler. I live in St. John, Missouri, where I pastor First Baptist Church of St. John.
Sir, is your microphone on? Is the light on?
The green? Yes.
Okay, that's better.
Can
Thank
hear
you.
me?
Yes. Just go closer. Thank you.
My name is Josh Holler. I live in St. John, where I pastor, do that word thing again. Pastor the First Baptist Church of St. John. It's a suburb in St. Louis. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I'm an adjunct professor at Missouri Baptist University. I'm a husband, father of 5. One of those we adopted through the foster care system. Most importantly, though, I'm a servant of the only God, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I'm here this morning along with the support of the others behind me for this bill for 1072 and 1417. And to the end of some of the subtext of what I heard in some of the dialogue this morning, what I want to share is a little bit about my own experience just outside of the abortion clinics here when I moved to St. Louis in 2014. One of the ministries I became quickly a part of is we would go outside the Planned Parenthood off of Forest Parkway. We would also go to Granite City in Illinois. It's not a Planned Parenthood. It was dubbed the Hopeless Clinic by passerbyers there. And we would plead with women. We would plead with women and offer them hope of any kind, ultrasounds, anything we could do. We would have signs. We want to adopt your baby. We would plead for them. And we saw a spectrum of women, and something that we saw that needs to be said that really burst a bubble of perception is that many women, I would go so far as to say the supermajority of women that went in were not victims. They were not. Some of them have come and had multiple abortions. Over the course of the years, we had seen some that came in and said, I hate babies. This is my body, my choice, except what about the body within them? What about the woman's choice and the woman's right within them? This is part of the subtext. What about the baby's rights? What about their personhood? That's the who that we're speaking about here, is this person that's just in a different location. 6 inches of difference inside the womb. Suddenly, when they come outside the womb, they're endowed with all the rights and protections that everybody else has. So many times, they destroy the fruit of their womb. There's just the videos about this that have been compiled are replete. It's almost an embarrassment to how many hours, hundreds of hours of footage you can go online and see this of people in abortion now, and others have compiled these kinds of things. This is part and parcel of the ministry that takes place out there. Not all of them. There was one time I judged her to be probably a 14-year-old girl, grabbed by the scruff of her neck by, I think, her mom, could have been an aunt, and she was in tears, and she was being led into the abortion clinic. Now, is that woman a victim? I think so. I mean, that's why we have the judicial system to judge her differently than the person who's a repeat offender. One of the guys I served with in the Marine Corps was a product of incest. I don't think he should be killed. I've met people that were products of rape. I don't think they should be put to death after they're alive. These exceptions fall by the wayside. We don't make laws because of the exceptions. What this bill is simply pressing for is something that is logical and sensible, but most importantly, compassionate for the unborn, to provide for them justice. We care about justice so much. What about the justice for the unborn? What about their rights that extend to them? They need equal justice to be provided for them. Proverbs 11:1 says, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. So, dear representatives, we must craft laws that don't favor the perpetrator of the crime over the victim. We must protect the unborn.
Sir,
We will be held accountable.
I'm so sorry. I hate to cut you off, but we are running short on time.
That was the very end.
Oh, perfect. So I want to let the committee be able to ask any questions. Any questions for this witness? They do this to me all the time. Okay, just so everyone knows. Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else here in favor? We only have a few minutes left. If you will limit your testimony to 2 minutes, please. State your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Belcher. I live in Joplin, Missouri. I'm calling on this committee to vote in favor of the equal protection bills. Behind me sits my beautiful wife and my 2 beautiful children. One is in the womb at 16 weeks. We heard her heartbeat just yesterday. We would have done it today, but no props are allowed here. So if you want to feel your own heartbeat, it feels just like that, except it's quite a bit faster. The baby in her womb is worthy of the same protection under the law, whether we decide we love it or want it, or whether it was placed there without either of our consent. The same as all of you were worthy of protection. We've all been through these stages of life that we're debating should be ended. My wife also teaches piano to two of my cousin's adopted sons who are now 6 and 7 years old. They were both adopted from parents who are incapable of taking care of them. Would you be able to look those two boys in the eyes, or others like them, and tell them that their parents should have had the right to kill them before they were born? We should not continue to discriminate against our unborn neighbors by failing to provide them the same protections under the law solely based on their size, location, or stage of development. God considers the unborn to be equal in worth to that of any other human being. In Exodus 21, God gives us a case law of a man who causes a preborn baby to die, and the punishment given is to pay for it with his own life. This is the same punishment given to those who murder any other human being who is already born. This shows us that God values the life in the womb the same as any other life, and we are to do the same. God also says in Deuteronomy 22 that those who commit rape are to be given the death penalty. If you want to stop or lower the amount of rape, there should be deterrence in place. Jesus says in Luke 17:2 that those who offend little ones would be better off tied to a millstone and drowned in the sea. In Matthew 25, speaking of the final judgment day, Jesus tells us, "Then he will say to those on his left, 'Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.' Then they will answer, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you?' Then he will say them, saying, 'Truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life.'" Who could be lesser among us than a hopeless child in the womb? God tells us that he will take it personally how we treat those who we stand to gain nothing from. You will personally answer to God for what you allowed to have happen to the most innocent and defenseless among us.
Sir, I'm so sorry. And I apologize. This happens in committee hearings where we have to limit the testimony because we do have to leave. Are there any questions for this witness? Thank you for coming. We have time for one more. I'm so sorry. We do need you to stick to 2 minutes because we've got to go, but thank you so much.
I'll be about 30 seconds. My name is Debbie Cochran. I'm representing Liberty Link, Missouri, and we are in favor of passing this bill. We thank the sponsors for bringing it forward. And just my personal reflection on listening to all of this today, I really appreciate the respectfulness that has been presented here today. And I also acknowledge how difficult this discussion, and I believe, and the references have been made by previous witnesses, that when we were talking about things that belong to God, life and death, we don't have those answers. So that really is why we struggle with this so much. So thank you.
Thank you so much for acknowledging how difficult this conversation is, and I still maintain that this is the best committee, and they are fantastic. This dialogue today, while super hard, right? It has been enlightening and lovely because we all were able to be kind to one another. So thank you, representatives. With no other business before the committee, we will stand adjourned.